Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Hash on this wonderful Tuesday morning. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and I'm delighted to be joined by our other wonderful co-hosts. We have Ben Powers, Jen Sanasi, Will Foxley, and Zach Seward. Welcome to the show, guys, and we're going to kick off the day by talking about eToro. So, Zach, what have we got there?
eToro, that's right. The Israel-based trading platform of which cryptocurrency is something to trade is going public by way of a special purpose acquisition company. That's a SPAC. It's the season of SPACs. And this is going to value eToro at roughly $9.6 billion. So lots of interesting reporting coming out of this. One of those things being that eToro has had Bitcoin on its balance sheet for the last 10 years. They spent $50,000 to invest in Bitcoin back in 2011. And CEO Yoni Asia told our colleague Ian Allison this earlier today. So I thought that was interesting. But let's talk about SPACs. Let's talk about listings. Let's talk about public offerings for all these companies. It's the maturation of these crypto companies and these crypto adjacent companies. And this is just the latest example. Let's talk about eToro and its role in the market. Naomi, I'm going to kick this to you. When you think of eToro, what do you think of?
Actually, I think it was Consensus 3 years ago, maybe, and just like seeing eToro everywhere, and I think they were like on the seat covers, and that was sort of my introduction to them. And I was like, oh, this is a large company, and since then they've just been in the headlines nonstop. I think that it's just another example of crypto going mainstream. What's interesting about public offerings is that crypto to me was sort of a way to get away from all of the red tape and the bureaucracy and create more freedom in finance. And it was meant to be available to more people. When you have public offerings, it's available to a very small subset of the population. It's people who have a lot of money, people who are accredited investors, who have millions of dollars. So I've always seen it as this very unfair investment vehicle and sort of seen the ICO world as being the democratization of that. And then, of course, we had the US government crack down on all the ICOs and making these companies and profit sharing available to ordinary people. So yeah, I think it's great that they're large and they're doing really well. I wish that it were available to more people, honestly.
Got it. Yeah. One of the things that I noticed in this reporting was that crypto trading accounted for 16% of revenues in the year 2020, which I thought was quite low. You think of eToro as being a prominent retail-friendly outlet for crypto investing, and to hear that it's still just a small slice of the pie as it relates to stocks and all sorts of other investments on this platform, I thought that was quite interesting. The timing is right, though. It's a good time to be going public if you're touching Bitcoin, as we float in the 50,000s. Ben, I see you nodding vigorously, and I love your shirt, by the way. That is a treat today. A nice little burst of color. Thank you so much for that. What's your take on this rash of listings that we're seeing for trading platforms and other companies in the crypto space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you kind of hit it on the head earlier, Zach, when you were talking about just like, this is the season, right? And it feels like through SPACs, like companies are really trying to get out there and get these public listings going when we're floating in this $50,000 range, particularly those that are associated with crypto in some way. Again, what you said stood out, just the 16%. I would have guessed more from that, honestly. And I would think that would be a big part of why they're kind of pushing to go public right now. But that doesn't look like it's the case. That being said, if there's anything we've seen, it's that with the surge of popularity and then maybe a lack of popularity around, retail, investment apps like Robinhood and stuff like that, they're shoving themselves out there as an alternative and saying like, hey, we can also do this. So to me, it just kind of shows, I'm curious about what the next firms that really kind of are in the crypto space and sort of, I don't want to say rush to a public offering, but really drive towards it this year, just with the nature of SPACs allowing them to do that while we're still in this current bull run, particularly after they saw maybe what happened in 2017 and then the dip off after that.
Yeah, I'm going to kick this to Will on the Bitcoin as a treasury asset front. I mean, so we're sort of getting this in dribs and drabs now. We had BitGo make sort of a low-key announcement that they had a bunch of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Now we're seeing eToro do the same. How many companies are out there right now that we don't know that have invested in Bitcoin for a long time? What's your gut say on that?
Well, I just did the napkin math also. It looked like the Bitcoin they bought in 2011 is worth like 90 million now. So I think
Bitcoin, I did the math too. Yeah, I got 138 million. I assume the high end.
Well,
So Yoni said we bought it between 5 and 20. I did the conservative estimate of $50,000 divided by 20, which gave them a trove of 2,500 Bitcoin. And I multiplied that by the present price, and I got like 138. But I'm really bad at math, so I mean I don't know if that's right. But
I did the higher price because Bitcoin hit $32 in 2011 at like the peak. So that's how I got. So they got a lot of Bitcoin is the point, right? They got more than all of us. But there's a lot of companies, I think, that have Bitcoin on their balance sheet that we just don't know about. I think the headlines is often just like Fortune 500 companies like Tesla. It's like, oh, wow, Tesla has Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Well, there's a lot of other companies that keep it under the radar, or there's there's millions of companies in the world. I think 2 weeks ago was it, Zach, that Finnish or Scandinavian energy company announced that they put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. An Israeli pension fund had done it a few weeks before that. And, the information is just slowly coming out that everyone's trying to get this reserve asset, or what is thought of as a reserve asset going forward, as the dollar weakened and global markets in general are kind of weak.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see New York Life might be the next one, right? They invested in that recent round with NYDIG, who facilitated the Bitcoin buy for Mass Mutual famously over the summer. So I think that one is primed for a reveal. But Ben, what was it that you were going to say on that?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, kind of in a wake of all of these companies buying in to Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. And the real headliners, obviously, that we've seen, like Tesla and others. I'm always interested in the companies that don't make a big deal out of it, right? Like, I think that's almost just as interesting, because it shows you that, unlike maybe MicroStrategy, where they're double, tripling, quadrupling down on this and not trying to necessarily tie their stock price to a service per se, but rather to like the price of a crypto generally, this might be the inverse of that, where, eToro is betting on some ways their service offerings really being the driver of any sort of future stock price, rather than a sort of asset hold on the back end. So that was something that stuck out to me, just in terms of, I'm going to be really curious about this going forward. Who has been holding for a while and just hasn't made a big deal out of it? I think that could tell us a lot.
Zach, just to take a step back, can you talk us through the significance of merging with a SPAC? Like, what's the difference between that and going public?
I mean, so SPAC is just sort of like an expedited way to hit the public markets, right? So there's these blank check acquisition companies. They don't really, to my understanding, they don't really do much. They're just a vehicle by which these other companies can hit the public markets and be traded in stock. So I think when eToro is trading as a stock, it's going to be interesting to see if it follows, sort of these Bitcoin proxy stocks that we've been talking about in recent months. But given that, again, they do so much when it comes to investing in the different types of assets that are on this platform, from gold to stocks to Bitcoin, it's going to be interesting to see if there's any correlation there. Naomi, you were going to jump in with something.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about SPACs. So aren't they sort of companies that have been listed a while ago and then they've since kind of become defunct companies? And so they're kind of these empty shells. And the idea is that it's so difficult to get listed. You have to jump through so many hoops that it's a lot easier for companies to just kind of merge with these existing, now not really existing companies. And then that enables them to get a public listing without jumping through all the initial hoops.
Yeah, it's definitely a means to an end, right? It's a vehicle toward reaching these public markets. And, I think in the broader tech world, we're seeing a lot of excitement and activity around this. I saw that Shaquille O'Neal has a SPAC, and I can't believe that no one has said Shaquille O'Neal, which is a good pun. Like my tweet on twitter.com. I did that tweet one time. Anyway.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll show myself out. Let's just change gears. Let's kill this story. Let's shift topics entirely. I'm going to throw this one to Will, who has a little bit about Ray Dalio. Will, take it away.
Yeah, not too much different from what we were talking about in terms of general market outlook. So Ray Dalio issued a note to his investors and then also published it on LinkedIn. Pretty long read, but a good one nonetheless. Dalio is kind of delving into the bond market, and he's one of the most prolific investors, of course, over the last decade or two. And his long-term outlook is pretty bearish for the dollar and pretty bullish for some of the Asian markets, specifically China. Interesting point in this note for crypto markets, at least, is that he foresees tax regulations and other regulations around wealth being an impediment to holding Bitcoin. He's saying that the downturn in bond yields, which has been going on for quite a while, as we've seen quantitative easing, the printing of money, is going to lead to wealth tax as people try to flee into riskier assets or assets that the government can't control, like gold or Bitcoin. So I'm going to punt this to the group. I think, Naomi, your take, what's your long-term economic outlook? Where are you putting your money? Are you putting it in bonds?
Obviously, I'm putting my money into Bitcoin as a long-term economic outlet. I think that's why a lot of us are here. We like the idea of having an alternative because we see what the other alternative is, and that's just increasing printing of money. You have the Treasury that is just issuing so many bonds, and then the central bank that is just printing a ton of money in order to buy those bonds. And so as a result, no one really wants to buy bonds right now, as you mentioned, Will. It's like they're having to, like we saw last week, the yield is rising because it's trying to incentivize people to get into this market that no one's really interested in right now. I think Ray Dalio has a great point there. He's obviously a very smart guy, and he's recognizing that the US economic outlook isn't looking that great right now for people. There is no sane reason why people should be holding assets in the long term when they're getting below inflation yields on them. So, people are looking to other assets, better ways to store their cash reserves. You have MicroStrategy, as we mentioned, who's just like, I'm buying Bitcoin. I'm buying $1 billion more Bitcoin. I'm buying a gazillion more Bitcoin. They're just like all in on Bitcoin. They're issuing all this debt for their company so they can get even more Bitcoin. And their reasoning is because it is a better store of value than cash at the moment. They think that it is safer for their customers, for their shareholders, than storing their money in cash, which is just going to get inflated away with all of the money printing that is going on. So I tend to agree. Like last year, we saw the amount of US dollars in existence rise by 41%. This year, obviously, it's going to be a whole bunch more as we continue to print money. So I think that the sane approach is to look for things other than cash.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I want to throw this over to Zach. When you're reading these investment notes, just as from an editorial perspective, what are you looking for in them?
That's a great question. I didn't read this investment note, so I can't speak to this one specifically, but I will speak on the topic of people opining about Bitcoin. I think it's interesting to see, these Wall Street titans, writing this stuff down and sort of reckoning with this new asset class that is emerging before their eyes, right? I think, most people had been dismissive of this. And so you're seeing sort of these conversion narratives right now, like, oh, okay, now I reassessed and here's why. And we're in a different macroeconomic environment in which an asset like Bitcoin makes more sense. So I think, I don't want to call it like mental gymnastics, but like looking at sort of like, the evolution that they're articulating here, again, these are conversion narratives and like kind of like going along with them on their journey to why they came to this conclusion. I think that's the thing that's interesting to me from an editorial perspective. Naomi, what do you got?
Yeah, I want to add to that, Zach. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. When people first got excited about Bitcoin in 2009 and people were looking at this saying, this is the future, or in 2008, when the white paper was released, it was because people saw that this was going to happen. People predicted this. And as you said, Zach, all of the institutional players were like, this is ridiculous, magic internet money. No one's going to take this seriously. But the reason why people at the outset were so excited is because we were right in the thick of the 2008 crisis. We'd seen a huge amount of money printing. We thought there were going to be huge inflationary effects, and it's debated whether or not we saw those. Obviously, we got the education bubble, the college bubble just went out of control. We got the housing bubble was still out of control. No real policy changes were made there, so people are still pouring money into real estate, and it's getting out of control. So people expected to see much worse, and then the amount of quantitative easing that we're seeing at the moment is completely a different ballpark to what we saw in 2008. Like it's astronomical compared to what we saw then. And so I think that at the time, people did recognize that this was the trend and there was no stopping it. And they tested the waters in 2008 and it was just going to continue. And they were absolutely right. And now you have these other smart people jumping on board saying, yes, we actually agree 10 years later. So it's great that they're finally, joining the game. But people have been predicting this for a while. And I think those early predictors were correct. Zach?
Yeah, I mean, the skeptic in me is also like, money talks, right? And all of a sudden there's these big giant numbers being bandied about around this thing, and you see it with NFTs and you see it with Bitcoin, and at some point these numbers get impossible to ignore for people who are in the business of making money. So
well, it's a chicken and egg, right? Those numbers come about because we've just seen a huge amount of stimulus. Like, that's how the bull run was created. Everyone's pouring their money into crypto, and it really started with MicroStrategy, I would say, when they were like, hey, we're buying a bunch because all of this printing is ridiculous. Jen, what were you gonna say about all this?
Well, I mean, we keep bringing up MicroStrategy. Michael Saylor tweeted this morning that Bitcoin is the obvious answer to what Ray is saying. But I want to talk about a future with taxes and regulations and even higher fees. What do people need to be cautioned against? Because we're saying that Bitcoin is the obvious answer, and should these things come to fruition, what do we need to worry about?
Ben, you want to take this one?
I mean, I think we'll take it away.
Okay. Yeah, I think what Dalio is kind of noting in the piece, so not my opinion, his, is that as inflation occurs and you see bond yields decrease, we're going to see large flights of assets into different asset classes entirely. So like gold or Bitcoin, something where the government cannot seize it. We know that Elizabeth Warren has just proposed a new wealth tax, and Dalio sees a wealth tax of some sort coming along the pipeline in the next few years. And, there is the possibility that, a government in some future point decides that they don't like Bitcoin and take some negative actions against it. You see that in other countries like India all the time, where they try to ban Bitcoin. It's difficult to do, but it's not unfounded. In the United States in the 1830s, gold was banned and it was seized throughout the country. So there's a precedent for it, and there's also the stage is kind of set, in Dalio's opinion, for this kind of movement of asset classes entirely. But I'm going to toss it over to Zach for what we got next.
I'll catch your pass, and I will throw us to the tease. After the break, we are going to talk about NFTs again. That Elon Musk guy, he is at it again, folks. And people are trying to buy the tweet version of his NFT about NFTs. We'll break it all down after the break. Thanks.
Hello again, everyone. You're watching The Hash, where we bring you the latest and greatest in crypto and culture. So I just need to ask all of you before I get into my intro, did everyone see this tweet that's up on the screen yesterday? The song was so... All right. So for those of you who didn't see it, Elon Musk tweeted yesterday that he is auctioning off an NFT-based piece of art. The bids are already over $1 million, and it's an NFT as an NFT. And as you can see, we have our little Doge doggy on there. It says HODL. It's like a lot of lights. I'm really curious as to who made the song. Ben, I know you are hot and cold on NFTs. You've been real on them lately. How does this make you feel?
Well, my shirt belies my crankiness today around NFTs more generally. I am not bright and cheery about them. But no, what I thought was interesting, I've been having conversations about this morning, is, what qualifies as news around NFTs these days? I think that there's such a saturation of people talking about them, about people glomming onto them, about people not even really caring about them as a object or a, valuable thing. They just kind of want to cash in on what is an increasingly looking like, and, people called most likely a bubble. Around these sorts of things. And to me, I guess this is noteworthy because it's Elon's first NFT, if I'm not misunderstanding. And that's interesting when somebody actually mints something, tries to sell it. It is in keeping with Elon's sort of, Twitter trolley nature, that it is a tweet about an NFT, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm trying to nail down like what is newsworthy in this space anymore, because so much of it to me just feels like a complete wash.
Yeah, Ben, you're right. It feels like as soon as you launch an NFT, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to be in the headlines the next day. It doesn't matter what the platform. Zach, what do you got?
I'm super confused. Did he list the NFT itself somewhere? Because like the tweet is what is getting
That's
crazy numbers, right? So like, you know, this is the same platform that, you know, Jack Dorsey called attention to, valuables by cent. And, you know, the bids on the tweet of the NFT are over $1 million by the same guy who led the bidding on the Jack Dorsey tweet, this guy who runs like an Oracle system in the Tron ecosystem. So this guy is going all in crazy style on famous tweets. So is there another sale like beyond the tweet, or like, is that clear at this point? Did he actually list it on one of the platforms?
Isn't this part of the issue though? Like, like what does all this actually mean? You know, like, because I don't have the answer for you, Zach. And I think that points at like, this is just a layer on top of a layer.
I just want to know. I want to know where the actual, you know, where the actual work will live beyond just the tokenized tweet that is, getting ridiculous bids. So anyway.
It is actually unclear. I'm not sure if there is an actual NFT somewhere, Zach. But I want to say, I think you put us onto valuables before Jack did.
Oh, damn right I did. I was talking about that in December, dude. I tried, folks. I tried, but yeah, I don't have that cachet. You know, the Jack Dorsey tweet, by the way, the auction for that one is closing on March 21st. So we're gonna have to mark our calendars and see what ultimately ends up being sold for. But yeah, valuables. It happened.
Well, it's also like, did Elon actually make any of this? You know, that's sort of my thing. We're getting to the whole like creator dynamic, and to me, and we'll talk about this more in the story I bring up next, but like I'm starting to just not care again about like what the NFTs are and like how trolly or how funny or how interesting context they might be.
Like,
it's true, Ben.
Like, I care about it. I don't.
Yeah, your opinion is losing value.
Just like NFTs will one day.
Yeah. Like, to go to the bubble comments, like, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk was actually on CoinDesk TV earlier today and had an interesting comment about, you know, the nature of these bubbles, right? He compared the NFT bubble of the present moment to the techstock.com bubble of 2000. And that was a bubble. It burst. A lot of these like pet van and like web van and like pet, remember all those silly commercials? They all went by the wayside, but these foundational technologies are here with us today. And now I'm talking to you using some of these platforms right now. So I think the thing to think about when you hear these guys say, hey, this is a bubble, is that they fully anticipate this technology to have legs past the bubble and for it to create very sort of foundational changes to how we capture value and exchange value on the internet. So I don't know. I guess I'm trying to keep that in mind about bubbles. Naomi.
Yeah, I want to add on to that. I think that's a great comparison because the tech bubble, the initial tech bubble, it was because we built a web 1.0 where it was static pages. People expected if we build it, they will come. And there wasn't really much for people to do there. And they didn't really create that boom that we expected. People repackaged their thoughts and said, okay, we're going to do something different. We'll create web 2.0. It's all about interaction. And our product is going to be advertising. It created this entirely new ecosystem that we have today on the internet. And so what you're saying is that potentially we haven't figured out how to capture the value of this blockchain technology in the form of NFTs, but, you know, this will burst and we'll go on and figure out how to create something even more valuable out of this technology, which is a kind of exciting prospect.
Yeah, I know we say every time someone launches an NFT, it becomes news, but I have to mention that Post Malone launched another series of NFTs this morning. And it's very similar to, Naomi, what we were talking about with what we want Taylor Swift to do. He's launching NFTs He's launching NFTs that will allow the holders to have real world experiences when we are allowed to go to concerts again. So that's really cool. I still want to play beer pong with Post Malone. So hopefully I can make that happen one day.
I picked that photo for you with the red Solo cup, and I was like, "This is the photo for this story." So just shout out to you.
I appreciate
All right, Ben,
that.
take it away. What do you got?
All right. Well, speaking of beer.com, let's keep chugging NFTs. Sotheby's, the top auction house, is going to be moving into the NFT space and has announced an auction with the pseudonymous artist Pack. This feels, kind of on the heels of the Christie's news, like a natural movement for this house. And, again, I have a lot of thoughts here, but maybe the one that first came to mind, and also speaking about the high bidding on the Elon Musk tweet, is we talked about with the Christie's context, this being a way for the more general audience or general world and maybe high class art bidders to get in on NFTs. But we saw Metakoven, who was on First Mover at 9 a.m. today and had some interesting comments, who is the buyer of the 6.93 million people NFT, buy on that one. He was competing against Justin Sun for that top bidding. And then now we have another crypto native artist sort of coming in and being sold on Sotheby's, which to me says it's not the mainstream that's buying these things. It's sort of the inherent crypto community and the big whales there. So I'm curious to get the group's reaction to this, because I can dive in more. But Jen, I want to toss this to you, given we were just talking about NFTs.
Yeah, I think it is the crypto whales who are participating now. But I think people in the mainstream audience can't afford to buy these pieces. And much to what Zach was saying, I think last week, is a lot of these people got into crypto a long time ago. They have this kind of money to spend in crypto, and so they're participating in it now. But I think a mainstream audience is really starting to pick up on it. A lot of my friends who have not ever dabbled in the crypto space have been asking me a lot about NFTs. They're trying to learn the platforms that have really easy user interfaces right now. And so I think the mainstream audience is getting interested. And I have to say about the art world is I'm really surprised that the art world is so quick to adopt this technology. I always imagined them as like a really slow moving industry that hasn't changed over years and years. And I'm really surprised and delighted to see them adopting NFTs so nicely. Naomi?
Yeah, I will mention, because we're talking about Sotheby's sort of at the heels of Christie's. They're not. So last year in October, the artist Ben Gentili sold an NFT-linked artwork for $131,000 at Sotheby's. It's called Block 21. So Sotheby's was actually, I believe, the first major auction house to explore this territory. And really now, I mean, it took a little while. Like you could see this boom rising and people were starting to explore this world. And now with Sotheby's and this $69 million purchase, it's everywhere. Every major headline is picking this up. I wouldn't be surprised if every gallery was going to start having like a virtual room where you can check out their NFT collection. Like, I really do think this is a big trend. Not everyone is jumping on the bandwagon, though. I have some artist friends who said that they've gotten involved with the space and were using works that were from like past collaborations, and they've actually received cease and desist letters from artists who contributed saying they do not want any part of the NFT world. So it is creating divide in the artist space. I like to see people jumping on board. I think that an evolving medium is really exciting and people should be exploring this, but some people just won't have it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be part of the stuff that we really need to unpack. And kind of the flip side of, us covering and thinking about all these people announcing NFTs is we have so much other stuff we have yet to figure out. Metakoven was on First Mover, and I thought they had some really interesting comments just around why this was of interest to them and why they paid as much as they maybe did for it, though it seemed like it was outside of their initial budgeting for this piece. And they talked about it as like 5,000 days of art and like a huge body of work, one that could, would have like 5 floors of a building to be displayed physically, and was really made for this idea of the metaverse, one that, crypto enthusiasts are more familiar with than a mainstream audience. And part of what I worry about us not having worked out is like the IP laws, like the security, the understanding where your NFT actually lives, the ways for people to, not potentially steal other artists' work or like sell that if another artist they collaborated with doesn't want them to. And this gets back to the nifty hack yesterday in which, users experienced account takeovers because they didn't have their 2FAs turned on, which is pretty basic security, particularly if you're native to the crypto world where we have like hardware wallets and all this other stuff that is sort of meant to ensure against more malicious hacks. Because in the decentralized world, once something gets triggered, it's really hard to take it back. And I think, kind of fiat, easy on ramping into, NFT marketplaces lets users skip educational steps that I think are really key if they want to get into this space in a meaningful way, and something I think we're going to see fallout with going forward.
Yeah, you're probably right there, Ben. We'll see what fallout happens. I'm going to change track here. I want to actually talk to something a little more serious than NFTs. We're talking about BitMEX. So Ben Dalio, one of the founders of this cryptocurrency derivatives exchange that we have all heard in the news over the past few months, BitMEX, he has surrendered to the US authorities and he's pled not guilty to charges of violating the Bank Secrecy Act. And then he was released on $20 million bail bond. Now, under the Bank Securities Act, BitMEX and the co-founders and early employee were all charged with violating laws. They were apparently meant to provide documentation to regulators for transactions over $10,000. Apparently, they failed to do this, but then a spokesperson from Dalio said that the charges against Ben are unfounded and represent unwarranted overreach by US authorities. So I want to dig into that, given that BitMEX did not offer services to US customers. They blocked IP addresses for the US. They did seem to work to not include that, and yet the US government is coming in and saying, actually, we are arresting you, we are charging you, you violated our laws in our country. What are your thoughts on this, guys? I might throw this to Ben. What are your thoughts on this whole BitMEX case and on the surrender and the charging of the founders?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there are ways to circumvent this sort of stuff, even if you are in the US, right? Like digital technology does allow for that to be the case. I think, if crypto continues to become more mainstream, as we've sort of talked about, I think there might be more instances of things like this, unfortunately, just because countries are going to maybe start going into other jurisdictions and trying to sort out how they can, address various issues with their own laws, because the world of finance is so interconnected these days, and there is such a crackdown and a lot of financial surveillance along these sorts of things, which the BSA obviously is, for better or for worse. So I think we might see more of these. Where the actual BitMEX thing ends up, I'm not quite sure. I think we need to wait for more details to go out. Any trial that we get, any sort of discovery, if there's not settlements or anything like that, is going to be really interesting here. So I would like to see more there.
Yeah, I may just flip it. So what if China came out and said, listen, we have certain rules and I'm sorry, Coinbase, but you violated these rules. And yes, you did block Chinese IP addresses, but actually, people found a way to get around it. Therefore, we are charging you, we are arresting you. How do we feel about other sovereign countries being able to dictate the rules for people who aren't offering services to those citizens ostensibly, and being able to put them in jail? Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you have the perfect way of framing this is, there's other countries out there with other rules, and the US has to interact with those companies or with those countries, and then companies have to interact within that geopolitical sphere itself. I kind of think of this situation in general to past situations where new technology is sprung up, and the first adopters are typically the ones who are either rich or they're in jail. And in this case, BitMEX people are probably going to be the ones going to jail. And that's just how the world is. You're encroaching on really strict and stringent laws that are pretty old and have put a lot of people behind prison. Bank Secrecy Act, I think it's from the 70s, but Naomi, you can probably correct me on that. And $10,000. If you're moving across a border, you need to tell the U.S. government. And the reason they have that is because of money laundering and terrorism and other issues. And yes, it can be used to persecute people who are advancing technology. And that's just something that the BitMEX people knew about going into this beforehand. That's why they were skirting around regulations beforehand. That's why they operate out of the Seychelles and the Cayman Islands and jurisdictions like that. So that's my take on it. I mean, it's a huge bummer, but I think that's why there's DeFi and things like that popping up, because people don't want to go to jail, but they do want the benefits these technologies bring along. So I'll toss down to Zach.
Yeah, the fact that this is occurring, in the financial space and not like the information media space, right? You think about Facebook, move fast and break things. You think about Uber and its very lax approach to local transportation rules, right? Uber was able to play this game, and they were able to get their market. They were able to get their product to market in a number of cities because they're basically just flouting municipal code, right? But when you're talking about money and high finance, it's just the stakes are quite different, right? Move fast and break things is probably not going to work out well for BitMEX in this instance. And I think this case ultimately will be a test of that, and how the financial beast is quite different than the internet as we had known it previously.
For sure. Now, Zach, you want to wrap things up for us? It's a pretty intense show, packing in a lot.
I'd be happy to wrap it up for us. Thanks, Naomi. That's so kind of you. We're going to wrap it up. This is the hash for Tuesday, March 16th. I'm Zach. That's Naomi. We got Ben down there in the shirt. We got Jen over here, and we got Will. There's a lot going on. At 3 p.m., actually, there's going to be an interview with Yoni Asiya, the CEO of eToro. We talked about eToro and their public listing, so tune in to that at 3 p.m. And then there's all sorts of great stuff tomorrow, including the hash again. So, until then, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to wish you well, and just have a great day. Just have a great day, everybody. All right.
See you, Zach, and everybody.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
See you, Ben in the shirt.